Go and get started. So thanks for joining me today. And again, my name is Kevin Hancock, Director of Solutions here at Exostar. And today we're going to talk about what's an enclave, how to quickly and affordably secure CUI for CMMC compliance. Before I get started, just a few housekeeping details. Today's webinar is scheduled to last 45 minutes to an hour. That does include question and answer. You'll be muted during today's presentation. However, I will be answering the questions that were submitted prior to today's event. So when you signed up, it's part of the form, there was a place to submit questions. About 8 or 9 were submitted, so I've got those at the end and I'll cover those as part of today's session. If there is an outage during today's session, please just wait for a minute, refresh the page, and it should start right back up. Now, we've never had this occur, but just in case. This webinar is being recorded. It'll be available on demand via the Exostar resource library. That can be found at www.exostar.com/resources anytime after today's event. If you'd like to speak with one of our industry experts or request a copy of the slide deck, you can reach out to us at cmmc-team@exostar.com, or you can use the live chat feature on any of our web pages, and those can be found again at www.exostar.com. You will be receiving the slide deck. I saw that question just come across chat, also as part of the follow-up from today's presentation as well. So during today's session, this is the agenda I'll be covering. We just really finished the introduction. I'm going to talk about just where we are currently in the CMMC rulemaking process. We'll talk about whether or not it makes sense to do an enterprise system security plan or choose an enclave option. We'll talk about the data flow within your organization and follow that CUI to help you make that determination. I'll give you an overview of Exostar's Enclave solution and how that works and how that might fit your needs or really any of these types of solutions. I do have a very short demonstration of Exostar's managed Microsoft 365 Enclave solution as well. And then I'll answer those questions that were submitted. So where are we today in this CMMC rulemaking process? Hopefully, as most of you know, the proposed rule moved over from the DoD and into the Federal Register on December 26th of 2023. What that kicked off was a comment period that lasted 60 days. That closed on February 26th of 2024. Now, in reading the CMMC rule as it was submitted, it really didn't change anything that we haven't been talking about for the last few years, right? The main difference between CMMC and what people need to do today is that we've moved away from that self-attestation, right? You get a contract, you affirm that you meet the NIST 800-171 requirements if you're receiving controlled unclassified information as part of that contract. We've moved away from that self-attestation to now, if you do receive controlled unclassified information, once every 3 years, you'll have to do a third-party assessment of your adherence to those NIST 800-171 controls. You've still got to provide, hey, John, can you hear my audio? I just saw that come across.
Yes, your audio is fine, Kevin.
Okay, thank you. A senior company official still needs to affirm that you are following those. And the other major difference, if you will, is that POAMs are allowed. However, POAMs are only allowed for certain NIST 800-171 controls. Additionally, if you do have a POAM, those must be closed within 180 days. So those are the major, if you will, things that haven't always been out there, but or may have changed since we've talked about this for a number of years in reviewing the rule. Now, with CMMC, there are 3 levels: level 1, 2, and 3, right? If you're level 1, it means you don't receive controlled unclassified information as part of your contracts. You need to be at level 1. You need to meet 15 requirements. Those 15 requirements are, a subset, if you will, and you need to do a self-assessment annually, and you need to affirm that annually that you meet those controls. Now, 63% of the defense industrial base fall into this category. For 37% of those organizations, you're going to be level 2. That means that you have those DFARS clauses within your contract that require you to meet the NIST 800-171 standard. Now, in particular, you need to meet NIST 800-171 R2. We got this question in about any NIST 800-171 updates. NIST 800-171 has moved to R3. However, the CMMC rulemaking specifically calls out R2. So you need to adhere to NIST 800-171 R2. It's got 110 controls, and each of those controls have a number of actions and checks that you need to make sure you meet. Additionally, you need to have, once every 3 years, a third party come in and assess how you're doing against those controls and verify that you're doing what you say you're doing. Now, there is a small chance, right? Less than 2% of those 37% organizations may be allowed to do a self-assessment. Now, the contracting officer will be the one that determines whether or not a self-assessment is available. So you won't be able to ask for one. It'll be up to that contracting officer to determine. And then there's those level 3, right? These are for those organizations that have critical CUI. They need to meet NIST 800-171 and additional controls that are drawn from 800-172. That assessment will be done once every 3 years as well, but that'll be done by DIBCAC, not by an independent third party. Now, 2 additional terms, they not necessarily were introduced, but they were further refined within the rulemaking. One of those is a thing called an external service provider. The rule calls out these ESPs, and when you think about these ESPs, think about these are those that you often run across as called MSPs, managed service providers. These are people who function as an additional IT function. They may be your outsourced IT organization for your business. They may manage a portion of your IT organization, etc. But if you're engaging with one of those types of services, that organization needs to be at the same CMMC level which you're going for. So if you're at CMMC level 2, your ESP or your managed service provider also has to be at CMMC level 2. If you're utilizing a cloud service, and in this case, and what we're going to talk about today, if you're utilizing a cloud service to make up that enclave where you're storing, processing, or transmitting that controlled unclassified information, those need to be a FedRAMP moderate or a FedRAMP moderate equivalent solution. The major difference between FedRAMP moderate and FedRAMP moderate equivalency is just who the customer is, or who that service provider's customers are. So for example, Exostar is a FedRAMP moderate equivalent solution. And the reason we're equivalent is because we don't have a federal government agency as a customer. In order to be FedRAMP moderate, you have to have a federal agency as a customer. They provide what's called an authorization to operate, or an ATO. And then they take you through the FedRAMP process. Those who don't have that agency, they get, again, a third party to come out and check their processes and procedures, make sure they meet all those same requirements. And the DoD has given out guidance of the information that those FedRAMP moderate equivalent providers need to provide. Now, once CMMC is finalized, there is a rollout period, right? So it's going to be rolled out in a phased program, and those phases are what you see here. The current expectation, and this is just that, it's an expectation. There are no firm dates that say, hey, on this date, CMMC will be finalized, because this is a process and it's still going through that process. But there is a current expectation that everything will be finalized by the DoD going into kind of that first quarter of 2025. Then this implementation plan will be put into place, where you've got that phase 1, which is level 1 and level 2 self-assessments. Phase 2, where you'll see CMMC level 2 certification required on new contracts. So that's when you'll need that third party validation for new contracts. Level 3, or phase 3, we start level 3. And you'll start to see in option periods and ongoing periods that level 2 be in effect. And then by the 30-month, there'll be a full implementation. So another question we got, and I'll cover this at the end as well, was, hey, what about the dates of CMMC? Don't yet have dates, but the expectation is that this phase implementation plan will start in early 2025. Okay. But that doesn't change what you need to do today. If you've got a federal contract, or you've signed a subcontract for somebody who does have one, you have certain DFARS clauses within that contract. Those DFARS clauses are what control what you need to do. Right? So if you've got 7012, 7019, or 7020 clauses within your contract, and you receive controlled unclassified information, you need to be in compliance with NIST 800-171. And if you want to know if you are or not, right, take a look at NIST 800-171. In particular, take control, or I'm sorry, not take control, but look at NIST 800-171 Alpha. That's the assessment guide, to see whether or not you've implemented these things correctly. If you've got the 7019 clause within your contract, you need to make sure you have an account in the SPRS system. That's the Supplier Performance Risk System. That's what DoD utilizes to gather information about the supply chain out there. And that's where you report how you're doing against this regulation. 7019 requires you to do that self-assessment, score yourself, and then determine whether or not, and then enter that score that you receive. That assessment guide, that 171 Alpha, is what you use to score yourself. You take that score and then you enter it into the SPRS system if you've got those 7019 clauses. So that's kind of where we are today. All right, so let's talk about an enclave itself. Now, and the reason we talk about enclaves or enterprises is because this is all about a system security plan. And you, as the contractor, you're the one that determines the, if you will, the breadth of the system that needs to be assessed. So according to the CMMC program, and this is actually from the rule itself, you can achieve that specific CMMC level for your entire enterprise, or you can do it across an enclave. And it all really depends where that information, if you will, where the information is stored, processed, and transmitted. So that's why we make this determination between, okay, so do I need to take a look at my entire organization, or can I carve off just the portion of my organization that deals with CUI? And you're going to want to take a look at that from a few different axes, right? You've got that option, right? Do I want to do an enclave, or do I want to do all in and do my enterprise? There are pros and cons for each approach, right? The idea is for an enclave is just as I kind of mentioned. Can I carve off just that portion of my business that stores, processes, or transmits controlled unclassified information? Can I limit the number of people, the number of processes, the number of technologies that are involved in that? Can I limit that to limit my exposure and so limit the scope of the assessment? Now, if I do this, right, there's an understanding that this has an impact on my users, right? My users may have to do what most people consider that swivel seat. So I'm going to use this system or this place to process, store, and transmit CUI. I'm going to use this to do my everyday business. I'm going to have the proper processes and procedures in place to allow that dual administration, right? And I got to make sure that I don't mistakenly introduce people to this system. I don't, that unintended spillage, if you will. Now, you can also say, look, the majority of my business or all of my business is part of my DoD contracts, right? That's what my business is dedicated to. I do everything, everything we do is part of that. So it makes more sense for me to consider everything in my enterprise that one environment. And so I want to encompass everything in that as my system. And if that's the case, again, that's great. So you need to think about that overall, your overall business as the overall system, and take a look at what you're doing today, modify accordingly, migrate if you have to, because what you may find out is some of the cloud services like storage. So for example, if you're in Microsoft Commercial today for O365, Entrada, Intune, OneDrive, etc., Microsoft Commercial has some issues around the data sovereignty, who can access data, etc. So can I, do I have to migrate everything? Do I have to migrate everything to, say, a GCC high environment? That data migration effort, those kinds of things can obviously be part of that. So, at the end of the day, that's kind of what is at issue here. Now, to talk about this, what I've done is taken an example company. So, I use a fake company that I created over on GoDaddy called Glory Minerals, and I created this company as part of my jobs as solutions architect here at Exostar to give me this idea. So this company, Glory Minerals, located in Memphis, Tennessee, we got about 100 employees. 20% of our revenue is from DoD contracts or subcontracts that have flowed down those same requirements to us. 25 of my employees are involved in that, right? I've got 5 in sales. I've got 8 on the production floor. I've got 3 IT folks, because remember, you've got to consider the IT folks who may be administering the systems. Because they're administering, because they have admin passwords, etc., they can access the information. So they also need to be part of that system security and treated as such. I've got 4 people in procurement, and there are 5 people kind of in admin functions or on my executive staff who have general oversight. They need to approve proposals. They need to look at, kind of what we're bidding, what we're delivering, etc. And so they may also be part of this overall environment. Now, what I did to try and help us determine what this, kind of what this environment encompasses, I created a turtle diagram to help me better understand the flow of CUI in my organization. So in most cases, we get CUI mailed to Glory Minerals, right? Glory Minerals gets information sent to us via email. I've got those employees who are part of this process, right? Sales, procurement, IT, manufacturing, and executive. I've got the technology involved. So in this case, I've got a cloud service that I utilize. I'm utilizing Exostar's managed Microsoft 365. That's an enclave up in GCC High. In that enclave, I can assign roles to particular individuals. Those individuals, this service can both receive emails with the CUI. Individuals can be granted roles into it, and they only access this via their web browser. So only Microsoft Edge or Google Chrome can access this environment, has the rights, and they get in with MFA, etc. We as a company have to develop the processes to add, remove users, use the proper roles. We need to train the organization on the CUI data flow, how we do it, etc. So all those things go into this. And then obviously once the contract ends, we either send the invoice on, we send the parts on, deliver the parts, etc. And we maintain that data in accordance with the contract. So again, as you as an organization, when you start to think about, do I do this as an enterprise or do I do this as an enclave? Can I support this? The way to really look across your organization is across the data flow. So look at how CUI enters your organization. Look at the people, processes, and technologies that touch that CUI or need to interact with it. And then how do you end it? And then with that, we basically can then start to think, okay, so for our organization, again, we are going to have that separate user experience. We're going to have the enclave users. They're going to access CUI only within the enclave. They're going to connect via web browser. They're going to work on the CUI or just view the CUI, because in many cases, this just may be, okay, this is our proposal, or this is the RFP we received. This is the response, if you will, right, in a Word document, etc. And we're going to get information from there, but we don't really have to, download the information all. We can see it, we can work on it, within the environment. With our everyday work, we're going to use our standard corporate tools. Now, these could be Microsoft, they could be Google, right? We could do directory services, email, or office productivity, etc. in Google, but then in the enclave, those people are going to use Microsoft. When you look at your cloud service providers, they're going to provide you what's called a shared responsibility matrix. That's kind of what you see here in the middle. This is Exostar's managed Microsoft 365. We provide you that shared responsibility matrix that says, look, these are the controls we cover in full, and these are ones that are shared. And you, as an organization, need to ensure that you account for those shared responsibilities. Exostar tells you what we do around those responsibilities. And all of that becomes part of your organization's system security plan. Because at the end of the day, that system security plan is going to tell the assessors what they need to take a look at when they come on site to do their assessment of your organization. And they're going to look to you to tell them what is the scope of that system security plan. And that's what they're going to assess you against. So that overall scope will also include a diagram, right, of your network, right? So this is our corporate network for Glory Minerals. In those sessions, those sales, finance, manufacturing, IT, etc., we have some folks that are accessing things via the web browser. Those are in scope for those people who are part of my Enclave solution. We've got others that are working in the regular corporate systems, right? That's outside the scope of this, but I still need to account for it. I need to know it's there. I need to know how I differentiate these people and how those people get in. And that's going to be part of my processes and procedures as part of my system security plan. I need to outline those clouds that they're going to, right? I've got an external cloud for directory services, email, productivity apps. It's outside the scope of this of our system, but I need to show the assessors that, yep, I took it into account. I know what's there. This is what's done. These purple things, right? The firewall, the security cameras, a server that manages images that the security cameras get, etc. Those are security protection assets. Again, they're part of my overall system. I need to account for them, explain how they fit into my overall plan, because those are part of my physical security for my building. I'm still going to limit, I still need to have those controls. That's my responsibility as the business. And then there are things like IoT devices, that's the little, the machine, etc. They're outside the scope of this. These are other systems. They're a specialized asset. Whoops, it chose the wrong color. Sorry about that. They're specialized assets that, again, I have to account for them, but they're not part of the overall system security plan. So we want to take a look at those kind of three things. Am I considering the entire enterprise or just an enclave? When I look at these and I follow that data flow diagram, that helps me develop my scope. And then as part of that, I also have to build that network diagram. And those three pieces of evidence are part of my overall system security plan. And then obviously those NIST 800-171 controls also are part of that as well. So the sample solution I'm going to provide you, or I'm going to show you today, is Exostar's Enclave solution. This is our managed Microsoft 365. So with this, we've got those individuals working. It could include some partners, could include some people wherever they're located in your organization. They're going to come into Exostar's managed Microsoft 365. That is managed and supported by Exostar's tech ops and support teams. They're the ones doing, if you will, all of those security controls. They're managing the identities. It's enforcing that multi-factor authentication. It's doing the active monitoring and security around the enclave itself. There's an application embedded within it that's enforcing the roles and permissions for people that you're going to allow access. Now, you as a company are going to provide the policies and procedures in which you assign those roles and permissions. You as a company are going to determine how people request those things, etc. And that's all going to build into that system security plan itself. So that allows us to build that enclave and put that as part of our audit and compliance boundary. So in practice, the way this looks is I'm going to log into my web browser and I'm going to access a Teams environment. Now, we're going to get information into the enclave via email. And within the system itself, we have this ability to create a mailbox within a team. So I, as an organization, created a CUI inbox team, which allows me to have a mailbox for people to mail information into. So I sent a Project Orange documentation into the mailbox, right? And this is, if you will, external to the organization. And in here, the email comes in, including all attachments. When it comes into this system, that's where it's checked for virusware, malware, bad links, etc. I can see, the information, and I can then export it here into the Teams environment, right? And then this would give me that opportunity to view, work on, and otherwise process that information again here within the web browser. This is an Exostar app that's embedded within the Teams environment. So when I joined, I got a particular role. Because I have that role, I have access to particular teams. Because I have access to those teams, I can work within those files. So if I go into the teams themselves, I can go into those individual files and I can work on them again directly here within the web browser, making sure I don't bring this information, into my corporate environment. I can make all changes, updates, etc. here. And that's how we're going to break off this enclave and make that part of our overall system. And again, limit the scope of our boundary. Now, this is part of Exostar's CMMC Ready suite. It also includes applications that allow you to better illustrate and create that system security plan. We have an application called Policy Pro, which provides you templates around the different policies and procedures that you're doing. Allows you to update those and then score those. Also allows you to import ones you already may have and score those and then improve upon those. Certification Assistant is the application that actually creates the system security plan for you. It will walk you through those NIST 800-171 controls. It'll allow you to put in your implementation statements, that policy library you just created in Policy Pro or somewhere else. Allow you to put in the evidence that shows you how you're doing those. And then also create those recurring tasks, recurring updates, etc., that you may have because of what you're doing. All of that that generates that system security plan. It'll score you against those NIST 800-170 controls and give you that SPRS score that you need then to enter into that SPRS system. If you need some assistance in doing any of this, Exostar partners with a number of RPO and C3PAO organizations. Those you can link in directly into Certification Assistant as you go through this process. They can help you close out these things and get them updated as well. So with that, I'm going to roll into the question and answer session. I am going to put up an exit poll. I'd really appreciate you taking the opportunity to fill this out for me. So let me open that poll for you. And then let me go ahead and dive into the Q&A. So how do I know if I want my business or system to be certified as an enterprise or an enclave? So this was the softball question I got. This did come in. So hopefully what I gave you today was kind of those parameters that might help you decide that. If you can, limit the people and systems and processes that you have, then it may make more sense to you to do an enclave. If the majority of your business or all of your business is all about fulfillment of DoD contracts, then you probably want to take more of an enterprise approach because you can't really carve out that piece. So number 2, do you think the government will stick to the CMMC 2.0 timeline? So I think the government will implement CMMC 2.0 as it's presented in the notice of proposed rulemaking. When that's going to occur, that's really the question. I do think it'll be sometime in 2025, but I don't know of anybody that can give you a firm deadline. That's kind of why I presented that up front to let you know whether or not, or let you know kind of what that implementation plan is and kind of where we are in the process. Because this is a process, it's a government process, but everything, all indications is that, it'll come down, it should come down sometime in 2025. Number 3, I think, because it was just a general question, updates on NIST 800-171. So I think this may have to this may be referring to the current update of NIST 800-171 to R3. So that certainly occurred, but what they've also done is, so there's been guidance put out that CMMC is explicit to R2. So until further notice, if you are, following the CMMC guidelines, you'll be responsible for NIST 800-171 R2, but you should obviously make yourself aware of R3 because that is coming and that will be implemented at some future date. So somebody submitted this scenario. A document is not labeled CUI by the agency. Thus, the contract does not get safeguarded as such. However, later in the life of the contract, it is deemed CUI. What's the requirement responsibility of the contractor? So, the responsibility of the contractor is that once, something is labeled as CUI, is to protect it in accordance with NIST 800-171. So when you're made aware of that, you should make all possible efforts to then secure it in accordance with those guidelines. If you have any questions or a question about a change in classification, etc., you really should ask your contracting officer and work with them when these kinds of changes occur. Because that really is, at the end of the day, they're the final say on these items. So number 5, which of the 110 NIST controls does Exostar's Managed Microsoft not meet? So I couldn't remember all of them when I got this question. So, but there is a shared responsibility matrix up on our website. So if you go to www.exostar.com, look for Managed Microsoft 365 under our products page. There is a shared responsibility matrix. 85 of the 110 are covered by Exostar fully, and then 25 of those are shared. All right, for 6. Is an SEIM required? Why or why not? So NIST 800-171, it's very good in not ever requiring a particular solution. Now, they may recommend a SIM. You may see that in the assessment guide or something like that, but they don't necessarily require a SIM. And the reason for that is it often, it often depends on kind of the scale of your enterprise and the scale of the systems, et cetera, that need to be monitored as part of that. If you've only got a couple employees, then it may make sense not to have a SIM, right? And you can, manually look at logs, manually look at firewall logs, etc., and see if there have been issues, investigate them, do all those kinds of things. And that's really kind of what at the end of the day. But remember, what you need to have in place at all, whether or not you're using one or not, are the policies and procedures in place that you're actually monitoring and reviewing those, that you've got a policy and procedure in place to record incidents, investigate those, report them in accordance with the guidelines, and if it scales, if your organization scales, you may then want to consider that, and then you've got to update your policies accordingly. So usually it really comes down to size and scale and whether or not you're comfortable in doing those kinds of things by hand, or can you do those things manually? Got a question about, are there any resources available in California to help small businesses with the cost of the NIST 800-171 assessment? I don't know of any particular California resources, but what I have found in the last year or two is that each of the states do have an MEP organization, manufacturing enhancement program. I forget what the E is for, but if you Google your state's MEP program, there is a most of them do have resources, and most of them are targeted at kind of the small and medium-sized businesses to help them, particularly in the manufacturing sector. That's what MEP focuses on. California does have one. I was able to Google that, and it did come up with one. I believe it's actually administered through California's Small Business Administration. So those kind of resources are out there, and I encourage you to take a look at them. So number 8 was the COTS requirements. Should they require level 1 or level 2 compliance? Now, it's my understanding that that if you are a COTS manufacturer, right, commercial off the shelf, if those are your products and your services, you really should only be at level 1. You may receive, federal contract information, or well, you will, because it's a federal contract. So you'll typically be at level 1. COTS by definition is commercial off the shelf. Everything is public information. It's searchable, it's findable in public resources, etc. So, in those cases, it's my understanding that most of COTS should be level 1. And then if we solely provide COTS as a subcontractor, are we obligated to achieve CMMC certification? The reason I thought this was a good follow-up to 8 was because I think there's a conflation of terms and things here. So CMMC is the overall program, right? You only need that third-party assessment if you're looking for level 2 or level 3, right? That'll be that once every 3-year external assessment to come in and do that that assessment. Sorry about that. So if you're a COTS provider, you'll most likely be doing level 1 CMMC, which will be a yearly self-attestation and a yearly self-assessment of how you're doing against those 15 requirements that you have at level 1. So you're obligated to participate in the CMMC program, right? Because that's going to be a contractual requirement. But what level you're at will determine whether or not you need an assessment as part of that overall CMMC program. So I think that answers all the questions that I got in. I want to thank everybody for your time while I provide you some additional resources. I want to thank you all for coming today. Now, if you'd like to learn more about Exostar's Managed Microsoft 365, we do a weekly demonstration of the product and review. That's on every Thursday at 2 o'clock. So only 30 minutes. So pretty. We try to get you in, show you the product, and then get you out of there as quickly as possible. But again, thanks everybody for your time today. I appreciate everybody's participation. Saw a number of things come over chat and work in that way. So once again, thanks for your time. Have a great day.